everything carried me through until March, until the season opens back up.
I completely understand. I'm having to put up.
Hi, I was looking for the meet and greet.
Oh, yep, it's gonna be in that back classroom.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is this the sign in?
This is right there.
Awesome.
And also just a heads up, there will be a camera here because Q13 is shadow cam today.
Oh, cool.
What's that? What's that? Ew. Yeah, Kim Portland. Chrissy, I'm sorry, Chrissy. Hmm? We're talking about her niece.
Howdy. Chose a good seat. Yeah, man. Makes me think about class.
Don't remind me of my college right now. I graduate this year, but every time I go to class, it's you gotta slide in real carefully and sit down and have the one thing that's a pain in the butt is when you have your backpack on. You have to get up, back up, take your backpack off, and everything.
My laptop was too big. I just graduated this last year and it couldn't fit on something like this, and then take notes also. It's just chaos.
I asked one of my teachers, there were only like 6 kids in the class, and the teacher looked at me and said, if that desk isn't big enough, I can bring a second one and set it in front of you. Because they were having us do maps, and they had me using a normal chair and using 2 of these desks and to spread a map out that was about 3 of this.
Oh man.
And I looked at them and said, what's this for? And she said, I want you to do the entire US. I said, okay. And she said, I said, so from when? And she said, World War II. And I looked at her and said, what? And she said, yes. Everybody else had to go and borrow desks from other classes.
Goodness.
And if they weren't able to, we had to move our chairs to the end of the table to spread the thing out, because there were 12 tables and 24 people in the class.
Oh my goodness.
So where'd you graduate from?
University of Oregon.
Highline.
Oh, Highline? Nice.
I didn't realize how big the campus was until I looked online.
Yeah.
26 and a half acres.
Yeah, pretty big.
I started building 99 and go to building 19. I walked the whole campus.
Yeah, that's a lot of walking. Yeah.
Thank you all for waiting too. She's just wrapping up, I think, a little later with the interview. Coming in, yeah.
Yeah. If I'm in a classroom, I'll sit in front. Or I can hear. Most people are.
you been here before at the meet and greet?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, it's very
No,
nice to
but
see
I've
you.
been
I like your
emailing and
patriotic
talking.
colors.
Yes, that too.
Thank you. Excellent. What are the issues that matter most to you?
The continued health care and pre-existing conditions.
Yes.
Tyler's had a brain tumor. He's had 50-some surgeries.
51.
And
51.
Started when I was 8.
he's had some memory issues and things like that. And we thought we were out of the woods with surgeries here a while back. In 2011, things got quiet, and then all of a sudden in 2017, we were back in there having a couple more. He just keeps fighting.
51.
Since he was 7.
51st one was when they removed his cyst, knees and my nose.
So we're real concerned about the healthcare
Yeah.
support.
Just because I'm a pediatrician, can I ask what kind?
So I had a cyst behind my right eye,
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and
the first tumor.
the first tumor I had was a supercellular cystic astrocytoma,
Uh-huh.
and they removed that surgically, and then it grew back, and they did chemotherapy for 16 months.
About 24 months chemo, 6 weeks of radiation when it came back in 2008.
I was going through high school at the time and graduated on time with my class, and the teacher told me when I got back to school just to go lay down and curl up in the corner and just go to sleep, and we had kids that were saying, why does he get to sleep and we can't? And she looked at him and said, he just went through 2.5 hours of radiation and you haven't, so shush up.
But then he'd get back up and catch up on his work later on.
I'd eat lunch with the teachers, and I checked with them first, and I'd eat lunch with the teachers, and while they were prepping for the next class, and catch up on my work, and graduated in 2011, non-special ed.
Wow. Wow, what a champion.
This year I'm going to be graduating college.
Congratulations. Where do you go?
Highline.
Yeah.
I'm in the Achieve program.
So what would happen to you now? You're graduating college, so you're in your early 20s,
I'm 25.
25. At age 20, you have coverage with your mom until you're 26.
Yes.
And then what happens if they repeal the Affordable Care Act?
Then I will need to start paying my medical bills.
He'll have some Medicaid, Medicare, Medicaid most likely. He's on Social Security disability, so he'll get access to Medicaid, and we figure we'll have to come up with a way to pay for some supplemental health care.
And healthcare is really expensive.
Yes.
So keeping the Affordable Care Act protections for people with pre-existing conditions is critical for you.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. And your care's been at Children's
It's been at Children's, UW, and Harborview.
And Virginia Mason.
And Virginia Mason.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that you are doing well. I'm sorry that you have had 51 operations and that you have this anxiety hanging over you.
The toughest one for me probably wasn't the brain surgeries. They had to put pins in my hips. I had a skiffy where my hip
You
slipped on the
skiffy
ball.
also?
My hip slipped on.
Because
well,
they had him on growth hormone.
one hip slipped on the ball socket. The other one they had to break to put a pin in. I was in a wheelchair for 6.5, for 8 weeks.
Wow. Did they have you on prednisone? Did that
Still.
contribute to anything? Yeah.
Still.
So prednisone put more pressure on your hips, weakened your bones, and then you got skippy. Oh, I'm sorry.
His
So
pituitary and all
I don't know
whatever
if you know
stuff.
where Valley Medical is in Renton.
I sure did.
So when you're going up the hill, there's a private school they call New Horizons.
Yeah.
That's the school I went to when I was in my wheelchair. I had all my classes on the upper part of the hill, but they decided to move me to the lower area with the older kids. I was a 6th grader and they had me in an 8th grade class. I learned real fast, show respect or give your butt kicked.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing you had to also be pretty sharp and do your work to be competing at that level.
The teacher that I had for the 8th grade class was a was the music teacher also, and he wouldn't take anything from anyone. And when I said that I needed help, say, just come ask me and I'll help you, otherwise just keep working.
Okay.
Because this was a school for kids with ADHD, ADD, Down syndrome, dyslexia, autism, and a couple of other disorders.
Everybody with different needs and different special needs,
Yes.
but all grouped together in the same classroom.
72 kids total in the entire school.
Yeah. And how many in any one individual classroom?
12. 10 to 12. The smallest class is 6 kids.
So federal fundings for students with disabilities is critical as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
It
And will
wasn't
you-
being met in public school. We were working the public school system and it just couldn't handle the ADHD that he had to begin with, and then adding in the medical issues of the treatment and whatnot.
One of my teachers.
We ended up pulling him out and going for the more smaller classroom where he
My
excelled.
teachers would allow kids to throw things at me, and when she was looking, I'd say stop that, and I'd get sent to the principals.
Have you seen any difference in how you're treated or in how young people behave towards one another since the 2016 election?
Not much.
Okay. Just checking. And remind me of your first name again.
I'm Tyler.
Tyler. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story.
Because I volunteered at the elementary school, what was it, when I was 16? And there was a kid that fell, and they were just as cruel to him as they were to me when I was at the school. They'd laugh and point at him and call him names, and they did the same thing to me when I would fall.
People's inhumanity to people.
It does seem to be a little harsh.
He was a 3rd grader, and I was helping watch him because he was going through summer school and fell and hurt himself and was needed help up. I went and helped him, and there were kids pointing and laughing at him and saying, "You idiot," and all this.
God, that's terrible. Sorry.
I was too, but fortunately the teacher that I was helping said that I had all the rights of a TA.
All the rights of a
Teacher's assistant.
And do teachers' assistants have rights? Okay.
They got to spend about 10 minutes after all with their heads down.
Sounds like maybe even more consequence would have been better. Yeah.
Some of them got to talk to some principals.
Thank you for sharing your story, Tyler. I appreciate it. How are your hips now?
I can feel it when it gets cold. And they hurt quite a bit because the campus I'm going to is a 26-acre campus. And all my classes start at building 99 and end at building 19. So it's at the bottom of the hill.
A lot of walking.
And per day I walk 56 acres.
Okay. Good for you, but not so good for the hips. Yeah. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you
We've
doing?
met before.
Yeah, I'm Chuck.
Tell me your name again. Chuck.
Yeah.
It's
I
good
was
to see you.
just down the road. What was that building again? I forgot what it was.
Aerospace machinist.
Yeah,
We
that was
talked
that one.
about infertility. Am I remembering this right?
I think that was what we were
IVF?
talking about. I have a new concern.
Oh, okay. What's your concern today?
So I mean, it's been all over the media, Kavanaugh's confirmation.
Yeah.
And personally, I thought that the trial was a little too short, and I think a lot of people feel the same way about that. And I was just hoping to see if you had any plans to address that once you get in office.
Well, the entire thing was just shameful and a heartbreak on a ton of levels.
Yeah.
I think what I come out of the whole thing with is it's more of an example of how divided we are.
Yeah.
And the toxic partisanship. But as a woman and as a woman running for office,
Right.
It sends a big message to women that they're still not believed, they're not heard, and I believe Dr. Ford. And yeah, I mean the whole episode was shameful.
Kim, I
Yeah.
just want to be mindful. I can
Oh my
probably
gosh,
want
we
to hear your
have
thoughts.
Hi all. We were having this long conversation and you're until then. Thank you for being here. seen before, but not all of you. So I'm going to introduce myself and I'll give a little talk. I will try to condense it so there's tons of room for questions, because I want to make sure that whatever you came here with a question about, that you get an answer from me. And I will, by the way, do this as a member of Congress as well, when I will have offices in all parts of this district and will be available, because I don't know if you all know this, but my campaign kind of started referring to an empty chair and a representative who I did not think was available to explain his decisions. And so I have committed to being as open and transparent, as responsive as I could possibly be. So I'm Kim Schrier. I'm a pediatrician and a wife and a mom. And I have been living and working in the 8th District for 17 years, almost 18. And it's been really my life's work and passion to take care of children and their families. I never in a million years thought that I would run for office, but the 2016 election was a huge wake-up call for me, because as I look at the priorities of this administration, without checks and balances, I really see a threat to children and to families everywhere. We had a lot of these discussions in our house leading up to the election about divisiveness and scapegoating and health care. So the morning after the election, my son came downstairs and he looked at my face, and he looked at David's face, and he just sort of said, and he was 8, "Does this mean we have to move to another country now?" 8-year-olds are very literal. But, you know, this really became a lesson that when something is wrong and broken in the world, that you don't just sit back, and that you do something about it. And I had no idea what that something would be. I still had no idea I would be running for office. I would have laughed at you if you had told me that I'd be here today. But I knew we were all going to have to roll up our sleeves and do something. And I believe women across this country who decided to run for office decided the same thing. And I think everybody in their own way, whether it's volunteering at a food bank, you know, making clothing out of recycled plastic bottles, whatever it is, people are all contributing and rolling up their sleeves in their way. Politics became really personal really quickly. I had to explain to an 8-year-old boy how it is that a man who children throughout the country uniformly refer to as a mean man who bullies people and who grabs women's bodies and then threatens to sue them became our president. Personal as a woman concerned about reproductive rights. Personal as a person with a background in science, because science should not be a political issue. Science is just science, right? You've taken some science classes, and by the way, also thank you for your service. We need to be paying attention to data in issues that are scientific, like climate change, but also in issues that aren't even scientific, but where data matters, like immigration policy and economic policy, that we've got to look at the information in front of us and look at history and see what will really work best. And so it is frustrating to see that evidence sometimes seems to not even matter. This is personal to me as a human being, seeing divisiveness and scapegoating and racism and xenophobia and name calling. And then, you know, this pattern of blaming one group or two groups for an entire country's woes. And right now, it's the Muslim population and it's immigrants who are getting hit so hard and made to seem less than human. And this never leads to good in a society. It whips up a frenzy, and scapegoating always goes in the wrong direction. And then finally, as a pediatrician and as somebody with my own pre-existing condition, I was just talking with Tyler a second ago about pre-existing conditions and what that means to all of us. I have type 1 diabetes, and I would guess that there's not a person in here who doesn't either have a pre-existing condition or have somebody in their family with something. And so the attacks on the Affordable Care Act and the constant drumbeat, we're going to repeal, 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 that was really personal, because I take care of kids and I feel this kinship with 26 million people in this country who could breathe this big sigh of relief, like, oh my goodness, now we can get coverage and know that we won't go bankrupt because of medical expenses, bad luck, whatever it is. And so I did what a lot of people did. I joined my invisible groups, and I marched, rallied, and called my congressman on a regular basis. And when that first Trump care bill came out, removing pre-existing condition protections, removing price protections for people over 50, defunding Planned Parenthood, cutting Medicaid expansion. I went as a pediatrician with 3 other doctors to Dave Reichert's office and explained how terrible that would be for my patients and for people all over this district. And days later, he voted for it in committee. And to me, that was deeply frustrating because it seemed like a not evidence-based decision. And because it was clearly putting party over people in this district, and we all deserve better. We deserve representatives who will really represent people and not put party over country at a time when there's some really serious problems going on in our country. So I stepped up thinking, you know, a pediatrician with type 1 diabetes at a time when people are struggling with healthcare and really gets it, could run against him and maybe even beat him. And so that's what got me into this race. I believe this election is going to come down to a few key issues. One of them is healthcare, because people continue to suffer, people continue to have anxiety about the cost of medications and premiums and whether they'll have coverage. And I can speak to that as a pediatrician, as a doctor. The other is what's happening to the middle class, that we are losing the middle class in part because of policies, in part because of a tax plan that reinforced wealth over wealth, again, by giving 83% of the benefit to the wealthiest and the corporations, and that really didn't boost the middle class like it was supposed to. And so the loss of the middle class. And then the third is just checks and balances. That our government is supposed to be a series of 3 equal bodies of government that check and balance and counter each other. And right now we have an unchecked Trump administration that is working against the best interests of most people in this country. And that is why running for Congress is so important right now. What does a pediatrician bring to the table? Sometimes people ask, like, why a pediatrician? To me, it seems really obvious. Well, one, there's no women doctors in Congress. And I think that as we're discussing our nation's healthcare, there ought to be at least one woman doctor. And I think especially at a time when women's reproductive rights are constantly being eroded at, chipped away at, it's really important to have a strong voice for women's healthcare. Because you're going to grow up one day, sweetie, and you're going to want to know that you can have control over your own healthcare decisions, right? The other one is just a different lens. That a pediatrician, and moms I think too, we look at our decisions not just about the next election a couple years away, but as how our decisions today will impact the next generation. And that informs my thinking about environmental policy. We just had a UN report that says we've got 12 years to take some really significant action. And that means we need federal leadership. This is not something we can expect to happen on a person-by-person basis. We need a real movement to address this. And it informs my thinking about how we level the playing field for kids. That if we really want every child to get the best shot possible at the American dream, we have to level the playing field. And that means investing in family planning services, in supporting pregnant moms, in universal subsidized daycare and preschool so that kids start kindergarten at least on equal footing. But if we don't address this until after high school, we've missed the boat. And so that is what the pediatrician brings to Congress, is this new and missing perspective, and there's nobody like me there. I'm excited about this race. It is also a really tight race, which makes it a little nerve-wracking. The polls have me and my opponent, Dino Rossi, neck and neck. But there could not be more difference between us on policy, on character, on how we've spent our lives. And I have spent these years taking care of families. I will continue to do that. That same spirit will follow me to Congress, to be responsive and be an advocate for people. Dino Rossi has spent the past 20, 25 years as a career politician, taking money from special interests, catering to special interests, and every chance he got to make a decision that would help people, he blew it. He promised to cut the minimum wage. He didn't support a bill that would have protected small businesses and helped them get back on their feet after the financial crisis. He has consistently put the needs of special interests above the needs of the people. And that includes his support of this tax plan that gave so much benefit to the wealthiest. It includes his unwillingness to let women make their own reproductive health care choices. And it includes his want to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which is so important to most of the people in this district. So that's why I'm running. The stakes are super high. And I want to answer your questions today, but I also have a favor to ask from all of you, which is, we've got 3 weeks and 3 days left before Election Day. Ballots will be in mailboxes in the next couple of days. And so this is the time, if you're ever thinking, maybe I could get involved in this race, like, we need you now. So talking to your neighbors, putting a sign in your yard, volunteering to phone bank or doorbell, every door knock, every bit of voter contact makes a huge difference. Now you've been here, you've heard me, you can go talk with your friends and say, yeah, I heard her. Here's where she stands on the issues, here's how she thinks, here's why she's running. And tell your own reason for why you're supporting me. Okay, with that, I will take your questions.
One of the things I really want to see in Congress are constitutional amendments. I'm tired of the Constitution being waved around as a blanket excuse for not making policy decisions. Gun control, women's bodily autonomy, things like that, where the Constitution, when it was written by white men. And we've amended it in some ways, but over the last, I wanna say a few decades, people have started to think that the Constitution can't be amended, that it's impossible to change, it's this infallible document that is perfect in every way, and we can't change it. And especially with I heard someone mentioning the Kavanaugh appointment to the Supreme Court, I am very concerned about things going to the Supreme Court because they judge on constitutionality.
Right.
If we amend the Constitution, they have to focus more on the rights that are currently not specifically protected, or they can judge in favor for gun control of the generally protected. Instead of, if we specify, like with the gun control language that is very antiquated, and had at the time no connection to what is now considered arms. So again, I wanna see those amendments because I don't trust the Supreme Court as it sits today to protect the rights that I want protected, if things go there. If the states decide to protect something, to try to protect my rights, I want it to stand up constitutionally.
It's a great question. And I think we're all very concerned that we're taking a document that really has not been altered, but should be a living document, but that is also hard to change. And it is. I mean, we are, I think 2, maybe 3 states away from having an equal rights amendment, which we've been fighting for forever. Although you were talking about firearm safety, think about women's rights right now and how those are under attack. And so you raise a really good point that we are basing decisions on an older document that is subject to interpretation, which is why we really need a balanced Supreme Court so that interpretation can be debated in a faithful and nonpartisan way. I'm in the back now.
I have had my thoughts about what is the most important matters, but over the last couple of weeks, I've had a new one bubble to the top: protection of the vote.
Oh, yes. Yes, and wouldn't it be nice if all states had what we have here in Washington State, where ballots are mailed to our houses, we have 3 weeks to fill them out, as long as they're postmarked by Election Day, they get counted, they're postage free, we have automatic voter registration now, like we are doing everything possible, we're a model for the rest of the country on how you enfranchise voters, and it is critically important. I am frustrated by the overturning of parts of the Voters' Rights Act because we are not at a place where things are even or fair. We're far from that. And so anything that we can do to protect people's voices and continue to have this be a government by the people for the people is critical. I would agree with you. Oh, sorry, I was gonna go to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm on disability and I'm on Social Security, and so is my folks, like millions, they are retired on it. What are we doing to keep Social Security solvent?
You know, it is not hard to keep Social Security solvent. It's actually pretty darn easy. The lingo is scrap the cap. But right now, when we pay our Social Security taxes, we pay them up to $128,400. And exactly the people who could totally afford to put more in, the people earning more than $128,400, they don't have to pay for it anymore. They would feel it the least. And so if we just got rid of that cap and made it so it's not a regressive tax, we could fund Social Security, and we owe it to fund Social Security. This tax plan, this $1.9 trillion tax plan that explodes our deficit, now suddenly fiscal responsibility is back, and they want to pay for those cuts to the wealthiest, right, by cutting our Social Security and Medicare, and that is just plain unacceptable. We all pay into that system, we earn those benefits, they need to be there, and we protect our seniors, period. Thank you, guys. All right, who else had that? Yes.
So my question is about gun control. I work in higher education. About 3 years ago this month, one of my colleagues went into his classroom where he taught and was killed, along with a number of his students. And we have these things happen too often in the United States. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on that issue, because as we know, there are also a lot of partisan groups that act to say that we can't restrict, that we all just have to deal in other ways.
Isn't it horrifying that now we're no longer surprised when there's a school shooting? How horrifying is that? That it doesn't even surprise us, they're getting more and more common. Something definitely needs to be done, and I actually do not think this is so much a partisan issue as a special interests issue, and that Republicans and Democrats, we all want our kids safe in school. I mean, I send my child to our local public school every day and don't think anybody should have to worry about our kids' safety in schools. And if we make the plan, how are we gonna keep our kids safe in school? There are common sense safe gun ownership legislation that we could do tomorrow and that would get buy-in from everybody. But the gun lobby is buying our politicians and will not let them come to the table and work towards safer schools. And that includes Dino Rossi, who took $450,000 in free advertising from the NRA when he last ran for office. It is really important because we all want our kids safe, and there are things we can do. Universal background checks, making sure that people with a history of domestic violence don't get their hands on guns, because that is the #1 predictor. Past violence, specifically domestic violence, predicts that kind of behavior. And third is, it should not be easier to buy a semi-automatic rifle than it is to buy a handgun. And so raising the age to 21, also not really controversial. And these are things that would keep all of us safer and certainly our kids safer. I wanted to mention one more thing on that topic because I'm a pediatrician. And so I also want to be mindful that although the media really focuses on those events and they draw all of our collective horror and attention, that still 3 out of 4 gun deaths in the 8th district are from suicide. And so we're talking about my patients, my teenage patients, and when you have a depressed teenage boy and a gun in the house that is not locked up and stored carefully, that is a recipe for disaster. Because if the depressed teenage boy reaches for something, it will be a gun. And if that gun is not locked up, 80% of the time, the weapon they choose will come from their own house. And if they do attempt suicide with a gun, then 90% of the time they will not survive. And so there's another simple solution. Just lock up your guns. Keep them out of the hands of kids. That will save lives and keep our children safe as well. Thank you.
I'm a mental health counselor, so the gun piece, I've lobbied against, the ease of having handguns for exactly the same reason as far as suicide. I just thought I'd throw in that the 2 highest populations are adolescent boys and elderly men.
Yes.
The elderly men one is the harder of the 2 to kind of solve as far as all that goes, but I think we need to have a more comprehensive view of mental health. I think right now a lot of times, actually I think the gun lobbyists are saying, oh, it's only crazy people who, have guns and do those crazy things. I mean, words.
Which is not true.
No,
You
it's
and I
not.
both know that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, 30 to 40% of us are going to have some pretty level of suicide, depression at some point in our lives. So that's a lot of people. It's not just the crazies that we have to watch out for. And so, I think I guess what I would like, in addition to the gun aspect, is kind of know what your view is in terms of improving the kind of the mental health aspect of things.
Sure. I'll start with kind of the back end of that, which is that's why having extreme risk protection orders are so important, because then if a family member sees that their loved one is depressed, at risk for suicide, they can have those guns temporarily removed to keep people safe. And as we're looking at mental health, I see it in my patient population, and this has changed dramatically over the past 20 years with the increase in depression and anxiety. And so any healthcare policy that we talk about needs to have physical health and mental health as equivalents, because they are intricately linked, and one does not do well without the other. So I would support more professionals and reimbursement and that equivalency.
I'd like to also see it more in the schools too, making mental health, some schools have like mental health clinics right off campus, in other words, where it's easy access. Because once again, back to the other population that's.
And Issaquah has that. Issaquah, and this is why, again, we need to level the playing field there and have all schools be great. But we have a counselor through a partnership between Issaquah schools and Swedish, a counselor in every school, which is really important to have someone for those kids to go to. Next question.
Hi. This kind of ties into what he was talking about, and you had mentioned healthcare and the healthcare with the pre-existing conditions. And it kind of ties into the mental health as far as how the pre-existing conditions are determined. Because like with the drugs, alcohol, opioids, all of these tie very well into the mental health, which leads down that path. And I see in the future where they will take the addictions and turn those into a pre-existing condition to
being a woman
to deny
pre-existing
health
condition. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the list has become so comprehensive that before the Affordable Care Act, women paid more for insurance because essentially being a woman was a pre-existing condition. We are more expensive to take care of. This is why we need to have protections for people with pre-existing conditions. It's why we need a balanced risk pool. It's why you need to have an individual mandate, because if only people with pre-existing conditions get health insurance, then of course the rates are going to go through the roof and insurance companies will pull out of the marketplace because there's too much risk. And that is why that was factored into the Affordable Care Act. Next question.
You've been mentioning about the Affordable Care Act a lot, but wouldn't an easier solution just be to push for more of a single payer system or a public option?
And a public option, thank you for saying that, is exactly what I have proposed. That I see patients and moms come into my clinic so frustrated about skyrocketing rates for their premiums. And what I'm hearing since this administration and the instability in the marketplace, $1,700 a month for their family. And to get that great rate, I know, exactly, $10,000 deductible. Which, right, do the math.
Right.
You're spending almost $30,000 out of pocket before you get a cent of benefit. And that's horrifying. So what I have proposed is having a public option, having that public option be Medicare, and giving everybody the opportunity, any age, any stage, even if you're a small business owner, that you could go onto your state's individual marketplace and state's exchange and buy either private insurance or buy into Medicare. And we know that Medicare has a 1.8% overhead and private insurance far more overhead, which gives a cost-effective alternative, sliding scale options to pay for it, which will have some competition and bring prices down. Bringing prices down is not really enough because we also just have plain old too expensive healthcare in this country. Everything costs more, there's no transparency. We feel it mostly in our drug prices, that our medications are too expensive, but it's everywhere. And so having a physician in Congress who is willing to just really dive in and address costs overall, and who's not taking corporate PAC money, so I am not obligated to anybody's special interests, is really critical in taking this on.
I'm a veteran, I'm disabled, and more importantly, I also have diabetes, as does 3 of the 4 of us in our household. I've had 2 daughters die from type 1 diabetes before their 40th birthdays. And all I see is the cost of insulin going up. We used to pay $25 a vial, and in some cases now they're over $600 a vial. You know, there's times that I have to think about, do I eat and pay the mortgage, or do I get my meds? Obviously, the mortgage and food comes first, you know, so I go without medication. You know, Medicare is a wonderful thing, but when you buy a med, like insulin, why it's a tier 3, I don't know, but it's classified tier 3, so it's, you know, 5 or 6 times the price that it used to be. And when you're on a fixed income, you know, you can't afford that. So what are we going to do to protect us?
First of all, I am so sorry, and we are hearing more and more stories like this about, there was one on NPR just recently about a 27-year-old who's no longer on his parents' insurance. He had just a little bit of insulin left in his vial, and he thought, okay, I can stretch this until my next paycheck next week, you know, a few days away. And so he rationed, like a lot of people have done, and you're talking about it too, because it's expensive. And when we're talking about a vial of insulin, by the way, which costs $260 a bottle is what the one I use costs. It's 2 teaspoons of medicine, 10 milliliters, it's a tiny bottle. And most people need more than 1 bottle a month.
Yeah.
And so that 27-year-old died. And that is just horrifying. And there's no reason that insulin should be so expensive. In fact, just so you know, Walmart sells good old-fashioned regular NPH for $25 a bottle.
And that's where I go.
And you have to go there.
Yeah.
But how is it that they can do it for $25 a bottle, but other insulin is
And
$260?
Walgreens is, you know, $85, $90 copay.
Yeah.
You know, so God knows what, you know, what the real price is.
3 of the 6 most egregious examples of skyrocketing prices have been insulins. So this is a particular focus in Congress right now, is why is this particular gouging happening and shadow pricing, which is why we're talking about that one. But there are at least 30 drugs that have more than doubled in cost in the last 5 years. And we deserve to understand why. We deserve to have Medicare able to negotiate those drug costs, because we really should not be paying more for our medicines here than they pay in Canada.
Exactly.
Same medicines.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sorry.
I can wait. So, first I want to say that I'm not a citizen, I'm an immigrant. I think we've met before. I've been following your work, and I saw you last Thursday at Sammamish. I've come here because I wanted to bring an immigrant perspective to the debate. I waited respectfully because I think most of the issues that everyone has brought up today are far more important than immigration. But I wanted to bring the perspective of immigration and how it impacts the U.S. economy and the U.S. citizen, because I don't think the U.S. citizens know the position that the current administration, whatever position the current administration has taken on immigration, how it impacts the U.S. citizen. The underlying principle, I feel, is that when you secure immigrant rights, you secure the rights of the U.S. citizen in terms of labor force and jobs. When you allow immigrants to be when you allow immigrants to feel threatened, you give incentives to all employers to hire them, because a threatened individual will not change jobs. I'm speaking from my own experience. Will not change jobs, will not ask for a promotion, will not ask for a raise, will work 2 jobs at a time. I'm a high-skilled immigrant. I was fortunate to not have to do that, but I'm talking about all the undocumented immigrants. They'll work 2 jobs, and they will outwork any normal U.S. citizen, not because the U.S. citizen can't do it, but because it's natural. When you're running you're running away from a tiger, you don't have to run faster than the tiger. You just have to run faster than the person running along with you. Right? And let me bring to you. I mean, the media has been filled with debate on undocumented immigration, as if it's possible for any person to come into this country easily by just following the rules, filling out an application form, and voila, that person's is a permanent resident on his path to citizenship. I'm a native of India, and I came to this country 3 years ago. I am still not a permanent resident, and I am not a citizen yet. And hold your breath. The wait period for me to become a citizen is 150 years.
Jesus.
That's 150 years for any Indian or Chinese immigrant to become a U.S. citizen. Now, what people have been talking about H-1B abuse. Do you know how, the way H-1B abuse occurs and how U.S. citizens are discriminated against is because it makes sense for any employer to get an H-1B from India, because he won't, for the same reasons, won't change. He'll pay all his taxes. He won't even have as much as a parking ticket. He will not change his job. He will not ask for a raise, and he will do twice the amount of work. And you can abuse him as much as you want for as much work as you can get from him. That no human being should be made to do. And if you don't secure immigrant rights, give him a path for citizenship. There is the reason why we have to wait 150 years is because there is a country-based cap on immigration. So someone from Greenland gets the country of Greenland gets the same number of green cards as the country of India, and the country of India has 1.5 billion population. The country of Greenland has 70,000, I think. And so it really means that someone can come from, say, Malaysia. It's not so much racist, though it tends to become a racist problem, because if it were a white issue, it wouldn't have it. If everyone from people from Europe as well as people from India and Africa had the same issue, then trust me, everyone would be screaming. But by throttling a certain section of society that has inherently, most Indians are usually, they don't get involved in politics, because let me tell you, Indian politics is horrible. So it's considered the most corrupt job to do. It's not considered a noble vocation. So people stay away from politics, they don't complain, and they just try to do the job even better, right? So this actually impacts the US citizen, and US citizens get discriminated against. It's become so normal today. So undocumented, in this administration, undocumented immigrants are discriminated against because now they feel threatened, and therefore more and more undocumented immigrants will get jobs over US citizens. Documented immigrants like me will also be discriminated against. Will also get hired over a US citizen, and I'm not saying my employer does it. I work at Microsoft, and I know that Microsoft is very pro-immigrant, but that does not mean that they hire a US citizen, hire an immigrant over a US citizen. It's plain merit. But I know other companies that do. So that is one thing. The second thing is that if you notice from the year 2000 to the year 2018, there has not been a single Indian. There was a guy by the name Sabir Bhatia in 1997. He invented Hotmail, which invented mail. After that, there have been thousands and hundreds of Indians who came into Silicon Valley and started startups, Sun Microsystems, Oracle, you name it, who've been who've been an essential part of startups. But because all the high-skilled immigrants who go do a master's degree, go get our PhDs, have patents against our name, go start working in Microsoft and Amazon, and again, I'm not saying Microsoft and Amazon are purposefully doing that, but when you start working for companies, they own your patents. So where we could have started new startups and competed against the giant companies, now more and more there's consolidation amongst the big five. People talk about the FANG groups. And Motorola was bought by Google only for their patents, and then they sold off everything else.
Sorry,
So-
sir, I just want to be really mindful. So we lose the room in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Can we talk afterwards?
Yes.
Okay,
please.
that would be
Yeah,
fantastic.
I wanted you to go because I thought that was such a really important
Yeah.
perspective. And so I want to thank you, and I know you said you waited till the end to ask that because you somehow thought it was less important.
Yes, I'll get to the question.
It is critical. I mean, I was just going to say it is critical to the culture of our district and also to our economy, that we have a path to citizenship, that we have secure borders, that we have an updated, that we have comprehensive immigration reform. And we can do all of those, and I think you brought up some incredibly important points. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
One thing we haven't touched on are global warming issues and environmental issues. I wonder if that, because when, you know, you have a beautiful forest and it's just clear cut, or you have a beautiful salmon run and somebody says, oh, what a great place to start a copper mine, which poisons the river. So how can we counteract those kind of forces that, you know, the whole reason we love being in the Northwest, you know, with the trees and the salmon and all the beautiful things that we have, how do we protect that from disappearing because of, you know, economic interest?
Well, one way is that you vote, because a lot of what has happened is that all of this talk of deregulation takes away those protections. We have a Clean Water Act, we have a Clean Air Act, we have an EPA that's supposed to enforce those, but right now, the EPA is essentially run by industry,
Right.
and the interest of industry is to make more money and to piss on the environment. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But you know, that is ultimately what's going on. And so again, when you have a government that is working for industry and for corporations and for special interests and not for the people, because the people, we love our green spaces. Look at the 8th district. Look at what we have in the 8th district. Mount Rainier, Lake Chelan, Mount Sasound Greenway. We have the Cedar River. We have the Alpine Wilderness, Snoqualmie National Forest. I mean, think about that wealth. Think about the recreational economy that we have, whether that is fishing, rafting, mountain biking, you know, whatever it is. This is critical for our way of life, our culture, our health, and our economy. And so this is why we need to vote. Because if you vote the other party, and then you can have a real attention to that in the table.